and Barcelona are dead and buried.
Barcelona have dealt with a lot of terrible moments in recent history, but this week felt so much worse than I could have ever imagined. After beating PSG in Paris and walking away with a hard-fought league victory a few days later, there was a certain aura floating around FC Barcelona that we haven't felt in a very, very long time. Not only had this squad just taken care of a very dangerous team away from home, but they were also riding a wave of very decent form. This Barca squad finally found a rhythm between their defense and their offensive abilities that led to some decent run of form, and Barcelona fans, we were definitely noticing. Football Twitter was lit up with memes and hopeful posts from culés all over the world, dreaming what could happen from here on out. Things were falling into place for this side, and around world football, there were very few teams that were overwhelmingly wonderful. You could make a very good argument about why this Barcelona side could potentially make a run to the final, and then when they get there, anything could happen. Over the past few years, there have been a few moments where Barcelona fans were able to be hopeful, but underneath all of that hope was always a little bit of doubt, thinking that, it's probably not gonna go right for us anyway, because it doesn't anymore, especially without Messi. This time, however, our hope felt backed up by the team's performances and by the landscape of what was going on in the Champions League. Now, I don't think anyone necessarily took the next matchup against PSG for granted, because we should all know that any team with Mbappe always has a chance. But we were still hopeful that our guys could somehow figure it out again, especially with a one-goal lead. Now, despite all of these hopes and excitement, there were a few signs to show that maybe Barcelona fans should not be as positive as they were going into this match. And that's because the team was weakened. Lamine Yamal, Araujo, and Cancelo were all on yellow cards, so they had to be careful not to risk missing the semi-final first leg, and Christensen had received a card the previous match, so he had to sit this one out as well. To many teams, a loss of a single player shouldn't be substantial, and it shouldn't have this massive effect on the way they play. But for Barcelona, a team that had just finally found a rhythm, well, taking one note out of that song, an important note, really changed the melody. Going into this match, Barcelona were undefeated in their last 13 and were one of the best defensive teams in Europe since Christensen was moved to pivot. Xavi started Kubarsi, and Ter Stegen returned from injury. But now the team had to find a way to defend again, a way that they hadn't defended earlier this season without Christensen, against the team that has arguably two of the best one-on-one attackers in world football. And telling by that first leg, they were going to have to do a lot of defending. And I think it was in all of that defending, combined with the pressure and expectations that came with the hope circling around Barca, that was just a little too much for this side. Araujo, our biggest reason that I believe Barcelona made it this far in the Champions League at all, made a huge mistake and got a red card for it. It was a little soft. In the moment, I didn't think it was a foul, but now I see it was a foul, and it was probably a red card as well. Araujo deserved to be sent off. And that set this game on a slippery slope that Barcelona were going to struggle to come back from, especially without Christensen and now Araujo, two of the most important defensive players in the side, not only this year, but also last year. There was a risk of this game taking on an avalanche and going downhill fast. And it seems that Cancelo was just not ready to handle all of that pressure, giving away a silly pen on Dembele that gave PSG the lead and made Barca chase that game. Now, Barcelona did fight back, but they created only a few chances and they couldn't convert those chances. That match, Barcelona lost, and that left us feeling terrible, to say the least. See, it wasn't just another bad match for the side in this bad run of form. It was embarrassing. Embarrassing for the players, I'm sure, but also embarrassing for those of us that had tweeted in support of the squad or made a video talking about the revolution of this side, or, those that had to go to school with a bunch of mean teenagers. We all had a hope we hadn't felt in years ripped out of our hands. not by a team that played wonderfully, not by our poor finances, but it was on us. We took that hope away from ourselves, and at one point it felt like tides were turning for this Barcelona side, and then everything slammed into a cliff. And at that point it felt like it could not possibly get worse from there. But oh boy, could it. Still recovering from all our pain and suffering the night before, Wednesday offered us a moment of redemption. Manchester City beating Real Madrid. Sure, it's petty and a band-aid on a very deep cut, but maybe a win from our prodigal son and Pep Guardiola beating our biggest rivals in Real Madrid could make us feel just the tiniest bit better. Now, it was never going to save us from what we did to ourselves the night before, but it would have been very nice. Somehow, Real Madrid didn't allow that to happen, and they pulled through yet again. And you couldn't chalk this win up to just being because of biased refs, but they just figured it out. And maybe with a little bit of luck that Lunin was on his game and Bernardo Silva wasn't, they moved on. Barcelona didn't. Neither did Manchester City. People around the world normally rest on the weekends, but on Thursday, I think Barcelona fans rested from the rest of the world. Culés didn't tweet a ton, few people watched Barca content on YouTube, and I think our football world stood still. Xavi even gave the squad a day off from training, but no amount of rest could prepare us for the Clasico to come. With Fridays come the podcast and the predictions for the week to come. And with that, after the disastrous match to PSG, came a lot of predictions for Real Madrid to beat Barcelona. That's generally the sentiment most people gave. Now, I probably would have argued that with 11 men, this Barcelona side was still the exact same side that beat PSG in that first leg. But I would also argue that Barcelona's mentality over the past few years has been very fragile. So when something goes bad, everything goes bad, and I probably would have gone with Madrid if I were on ESPN FC as well. But hey, Madrid were bound to rotate because they just came off playing so much football and it was an El Clasico. So no matter the form these teams are in, anything could happen. Nothing like suspense to cook up some hope for Barcelona fans. Some more hours of time to dream about the week before, to hope for what could come, or to try to forget about this season altogether. None of that could really last that long. And to add insult to injury, not even the Barca Femení side that hadn't lost at home since 2019 could escape this week, as they dropped the first leg in their semi-final matchup against Chelsea in the Champions League as well. I'm not going to argue about that penalty. I'm not going to argue about the refs today because there is a lot to say and it's pointless. Whatever happened throughout the rest of that 90 minutes, despite a comeback built up on the back of a 16-year-old again and some tidy link-up play with Fermin Lopez, it was far from convincing from the Blaugrana, and Madrid ended up scraping away a couple of goals to win. Again, we can argue about some of these calls, but no matter what calls were made, Barcelona did not defend well. I'm looking at Cancelo mainly, and it felt like maybe a bit of a hangover from the PSG match was still fighting against Barcelona and keeping them from finding their feet yet again, despite a very decent performance from Araujo and Koundé for the most part as well. I think a lot of culés will pass off this entire match as a robbery, as I think a lot of teams have throughout the season against Real Madrid. But the truth is, I don't think saying things like that and complaining will ever get us anywhere. And I'm not saying you shouldn't feel that way, but I think it gives us an excuse to allow us to play like that, to not perform as well as I think these guys are capable of. However, whatever you think, realistically, this match was just the perfect way to end a pretty somewhat terrible season. And the reason this video has to be made so we can better appreciate when they do get to the top of the mountain, so they can look back and see just how far they've come. But thank you so much for watching this video. It was a tough one to make, but I think it's worth talking about nonetheless. If you enjoyed, check out this video about Jules Koundé, because I think he was good in this match, and there is a lot of quality there. So check this out to learn a little bit more about what's been going on with him. Thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. The next one's going to be positive, I promise. Peace.